We're going to be playing around a little bit with the mic levels. Let's see here. How is that pretty? A little higher up? Yeah, this one was a little low. Yeah, I think that's a lot better. Okay. So, my name is Adolfo Guzman-Lopez. I'm a radio reporter. And so, what does that mean, radio reporter? Well, I go where people live, where they work, where they go to school, where they protest, where they play, where they worship, where they deal with pain, and I talk to them, right? I record their voices. Now, my microphone, if you stick around a little bit, I brought some of my microphones. If you want to talk shop, we can do that. My microphone captures the words they choose to use. It captures their accents. It also captures the pauses in between the words, all those telling silences. I report on what they say. I tell their stories. That's basically what I do. And as many of you know, we're living in a sort of, best of times of radio reporting, thanks in large part to National Public Radio, but also programs like This American Life, Radio Lab, and lots of others that have encouraged people. I think in the last 20 years, it's safe to say, people listening to those programs and saying, hey, I want to do something like that, or they listen to the programs and they say, well, I'm not hearing people like me on there, or people who have my interests, so I want to do something. So a lot of people have done that. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the reporting that I do. I'm also going to be sharing some audio. I'm pretty excited because I went back into my archives and I had to go through like 3 different formats of recordings. I still have some cassettes. I went through mini discs. I've got a lot of stuff digitally on WAV files, MP3, that sort of thing. And what I was noticing when I was listening to a lot of this is that, many of the stories and the interviews that I did are part of what we think about a journalism. We think about journalists as witnesses to history, right? Sometimes that's a personal history, sometimes that's a family history, sometimes it's part of the world's history, right? And I've experienced a lot of those different kinds of histories here in LA. That's one of the things I've been very fortunate, is that this job, and I think it's partly because I've been there for a long time, and I've been able to grow as a reporter, as a writer, as a thinking person, quite a bit on the job. I've been doing it since the year 2000. And so, because storytelling is about choosing the beginning, the middle, and the end, so I've chosen a beginning. It's not, as you know, sometimes the beginning is not really the beginning. And so let's go a little bit into a beginning before the beginning. And I'm really glad that I'm doing this without my editor today. As most of you know, reporters work with editors, right? So you don't just get to write something and then post it up, get it published, or get it on the radio. It has to go through somebody else, right? And so that editor is there, for better or for worse, to make your copy better, telling you what works and what doesn't work, but not today. And I've chosen this beginning before 2000. It's really about one of the first stories where I felt like I was kind of on a real news story of sorts.
Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? What you were just telling me about what the name of this area is?
We're about to walk out into the pre-primary area here at San Isidro.
So we're walking with a customs agent at the U.S.-Mexico border in San Diego. So those of you who've done this know, the exhaust rises from your knees into your noses. You're going like at a snail's pace. And this is a customs spokeswoman. We're leaving the booths where the agents ask for your papers, and we're about to walk into all those rows of cars inching forward, waiting to be let into the United States.
Smuggler? and when they see our officers approach, they panic. They might try to get out of line. And I'll ask you to be very careful as we walk out here. We've had officers struck. Sometimes, though, it's just in the heat of the moment. You get, quote, innocent travelers who've been in the line for perhaps a short time, but it's hot. You know, somebody cuts them off, tempers flare.
Now, this is the late 1990s. Now, drug arrests were a big deal back then, but this was way before the all-out war between the drug cartels, but really before this really tragic time that's left tens of thousands of dead, well, tens of thousands plus 43, you could say.
Sometimes we have to step in, but also we do work in cooperation with the San Diego police, and they will come out and resolve situations, as does the CHP.
So now the reason I'm here is to talk about drug smuggling, right? When was the last time you heard that sound? That's actual tape being fast forwarded. So
Restrictions on the importation of fruit from Mexico. So yes, they will smuggle.
So these agents are trained to basically know which cars are carrying contraband, drugs, cocaine, marijuana, any type of drugs. The agent that I was walking with found something, and luckily I was able to catch it on tape.
Come back.
Here it comes.
I'm sure it is.
They're gonna walk him in?
He's gonna wait. Nah, it's in the back rear seat there. Nah, hoodie got it. I can feel it though when you mash on the seat. It's pretty hard.
Take him out. Take him out.
He's gonna.
So this is what he saw. The car that we're looking at is, you know, at the time was like a 15-year-old Toyota, kind of worn down, but still looking pretty clean. And it had, what was interesting is it had like one of these Christian radio station bumper stickers on the bumper. It had a dashboard Jesus kind of glued on there, and you know, standing up straight, had a rosary hanging from the rear view mirror. And what he noticed is that on the back seat there was a fade line. So your car gets faded when the sun hits the back seat, right? So there was a line that wasn't totally straight with where the fabric and, you know, the plastic part of the car meets. So I thought, oh, that's really weird. So that tipped him off. And the other thing that tipped him off is that the driver, a woman probably in her late 20s, early 30s, her artery on her neck was just throbbing. It was just, he throbbing so much that he could see it. So he knew that she was nervous. He knew that something was going on, right?
We've just seen is the officer noticed something unusual about this vehicle. He was walking beside it and he looked at the back seats. They seemed slightly out of position and slightly forward. He stopped the vehicle, asked the driver a few questions, then opened up the door and felt the seat. It's unusually hard. We suspect something hidden within the seats.
Okay. Can we follow this car while it's being inspected? I'll follow you.
So the woman was taken away. She was handcuffed. I followed them as they took the backseat apart, kind of in another part of the checkpoint at the U.S.-Mexico border. And the excitement with which I went back to my editor. So, you know, I crossed the border and basically told him what I had witnessed. And to me, back in the late 90s, you know, this to me seemed like, you know, one of the first adult stories that I did back then. And in listening back to it, it made me think of a lesson. You know, I listened to all this tape and I asked myself, well, what did I learn, or what's interesting to me? And here, well, maybe one of the lessons is that even a little too much Jesus can be bad, even for drug smugglers, right? Even you know, a lot of protection is no protection at all, right? So
what is the next step in terms of looking
I was
at-
also thinking of reporting as a series of questions, right?
Inspectors are going to take that second.
The reporter, we like to say in the newsroom that the reporter with the most questions wins, right? Here's a question for you that's driven some of my reporting, some of the features I've done. Have you ever gone to back to a place maybe that you grew up in, or a place you used to hang out in high school, and a song comes to mind? Has that ever happened to you guys? Yeah, maybe show of hands. Is that okay? Good. All right. So based on that idea, I've done a couple of different stories exploring that. One of the stories was with the LA poet Marisela Norte, and she takes the bus everywhere. She takes the bus from her home in East LA to her job on the west side in different parts of LA, and she writes on the bus a lot. I recommend, if you don't know of her work already, that you look her up. She has a couple of books out. And so the story I did with her is I did an interview with her, and she told me about the bus that she takes back into East LA that goes over the Lorena Street Bridge. And the time that she took it, it goes back, she takes it at the time when we call kind of the golden hour, the golden sunlight is just, shining really brightly. And I put together a story based on that, mixing in the song that she remembers, or that always comes to her mind, which is "In a Sentimental Mood" by John Coltrane and Duke Ellington. So I mixed parts of her interview with that. There was another interview that I have for you that is very much about arriving and songs being attached to a particular place. And this person that I interviewed, I just ran into him recently a couple of months ago.
I was born in Honduras. I'm originally from Honduras. I speak Spanish. My first language was Spanish. And I moved to LA in the 70s and had no problems feeling like I belonged within hip hop culture.
So this is Kirby Hines. He's a professor at UC Riverside. He's a super accomplished playwright. And at the time, he was teaching, this was probably about 8 or 9 years ago, he was teaching a class here at UCLA. It was the first time I'd ever heard of it, a hip hop theater camp. So it was a summer camp, and high school students, those who could afford it, and also they gave scholarships. So it was a mixed, kind of socioeconomic mix of young people. And I thought, okay, I've never heard of a hip hop theater camp. So I went to do it, and I met him. I mean, I didn't know any Hondurans. I know more Hondurans now. He's black. So when I first saw him, I thought, well, African-American guy teaching hip hop theater camp, of course, right? But then the deeper I talked to him and the more I asked him, the more it just seemed like such a great story about this man's unusual but really unsurprising introduction to hip hop. Now, as you heard, he was born in Honduras, and then he came to LA when he was very young. So he's going to talk a little bit about what happened when he came to LA and how that ended up kind of putting him on this road to being.
I was 13, and it was my first year in America, and I had a strong accent, and I heard two kids saying, "Have you ever been over a friend's house to eat and the food just ain't no good? I mean, the macaroni's soggy, the peas are mushy, and the chicken tastes like wood."
All right, do you know what he's talking about? Yes? You don't know what he's talking about. Okay, great. That means I can play this then. All right, hold on a second. Okay, so let's see, how old was I? I was probably in the 3rd grade. What was it, 1979, that sort of thing. And this song was just incredible.
Stop. Rock it out, baby, rubber to the boogity bang bang, the boogie to the boogity beat. Now what you hear is not a test, I'm rapping to the beat.
Okay, so it's Rapper's Delight, right.
And my friends are gonna try.
So remember with Kirby Hines?
You see, I am.
So he talks about arriving in LA, 13 years old, right? and he'd hear people talk. Yeah, okay, you're from Honduras, you speak Spanish, you arrive here, everybody's speaking English, right? So he doesn't understand anybody. And all of a sudden, the kids are saying, have you ever been over to a friend's house?
Then you take a friend. Have you ever went over a friend's house to eat and the food just ain't no good? I mean, the macaroni soggy, the peas all mushed, and the chicken tastes like wood.
So this is what he was hearing. And so what that just introduced him into another world that he really hasn't left since then. I highly recommend that you look up, if you ever see Rick Kirby Hines' name as a playwright or any of his one-man shows, look him up. He's really very good. Here's a little anecdote about that story I put together. So as a KPCC reporter, I also often pitch my stories to statewide or national programs. And so I pitched this to a statewide program called the California Report. And guess what the editor wanted to take out? The editor wanted to take out a beautiful, it's a crossfade, that's what we call it. When I mixed Rick Kirby Hines describing what the kid said, and then I faded up Rapper's Delight at the very exact same place where the lyrics come in, right? And so this editor heard that from my original story and said, well, no, it doesn't further the story any. What's the substance to it? And I said, there is no substance. It's bells and whistles, it's entertainment. That's part of what we do, is we entertain people. I ended up losing that fight, and I still remember it, and it's still painful to me, as you can tell. Part of that responsibility as a reporter is also a responsibility to tell a person's painful story and to explain it. And this next interview that I have is one about that is about being fearless. And it's an interview about a group of Rwandans who came to USC. This was probably about 5 years ago, and they came to the USC's Holocaust Foundation, the Shoah Foundation. And what the Shoah Foundation has done is they've taken, it must be, I think it's tens of thousands of Holocaust interviews on video. I think it's all on video. And Steven Spielberg started it when he did Schindler's List. He did a side project of documenting these Holocaust stories. And so now the Shoah Foundation has taken them and they've indexed them. Indexing is super important, especially for their purposes. So indexing means that for every minute of testimony that there will be phrases, codes attached. Okay, say the Holocaust survivors were looking for food. Okay, who provided the food? Was it a friend? Was it, a Jew, a non-Jew? Did they witness killing? What kind of killing was it? Was it group killing? Was it individual killing? I mean, real painful stuff, but stuff that is necessary to document in order for historians to come in later on and really study, easily find testimonies. And also the Shoah Foundation wants to prevent future genocides. So that's where I met a man who I sat down with face to face to talk about these a really painful experience that he had suffered as a 12-year-old. Your name and how old you are and where you grew up, that sort of thing?
Yeah, my name is Nizerba Diogene. I grew up in Kigali. It's a capital city of Rwanda. Rwanda is a country of Africa, in Central Africa. Yeah.
How old are you?
I'm 29 years old. Yeah.
So, Diogene Mizerwa, like I said, was about 12 years old when the Hutus reached his village. And for those of you who've studied it, so the Hutus were prompted by their leaders to massacre basically the people who were their countrymen, but who were ethnically of another tribe, the Tutsis. They killed thousands of people. So when I sat down and talked to Diogène, he told me that he remembered the song that the Hutus were singing as they were getting to his village.
You know, the kind of meetings, the kind of, how to call it, they used to say...
Can you sing me the song that they used to sing?
Yeah, they used Tuzavatse.
I knew I was pushing it. Are you kidding me? This guy had witnessed the killing of parts of his family members, not all of them, some of them, and I was asking him to repeat the song that their killers sung. I mean, in the back of my mind, I knew that was like, but you just ask it because that's your curiosity.
Tsemba, it's mean we will kill you.
Can you say more of it, please?
Tuzavatsemba tsemba. Yeah, it's a word in Kinyarwanda. It's mean we will extermine you, or we will execute you, the kind of thing.
You started to sing it in the rhythm. I didn't let go. Can you believe that? I'm like, I wanted him to sing it, you know. And listening back to this interview, I'm thinking to myself, I really should have stopped. To do that again, in the rhythm, they sung it, right?
Yeah, they were singing. It was, you know, when people they are jogging, they can sing the songs which can give them the moral. Yeah, so it was a bit kind.
So he was at the Shoah Foundation to learn how to document genocide. And his foundation in Rwanda had begun the process of documenting survivor stories. And they hadn't yet begun to index them, but they'd started documenting them. He hadn't documented his own story. But I asked him about his own story. At the time they killed your mother and your sisters, you were with your father.
No, I have seen how my mother and my two young sisters have been killed. I saw them after. But while we were running away, they stopped us. When they stopped us, it's a kind of, they put us in a cycle, and once they mashed my father, they used machetes. You know machetes? They used machete. I saw just the first crop of machete on my father, then I ran away.
At the end of this interview, so that description was after he had said he wasn't ready to talk about it. So that's what I used in my story. His description of how some of his relatives were killed. And as I said, the Shoah Foundation is helping the Rwandans out so that they can document in as much detail the genocide that happened to them. And the Shoah Foundation says that their hope is that by doing that, they can prevent that first domino to fall, you know, that will lead to a genocide. The other piece of tape I have here, other interview, is of a dreamer. You know, I think the last 5 or 6 years have been an incredible time for undocumented students, AB 540 students, dreamers, and I do have to do a little mea culpa here. The very first time I came to UCLA to talk to some AB 540 students, some dreamers, and it was before they were calling them dreamers. I interviewed them, talked to them about the struggles of being a university student, but I screwed up. I totally fucked up. I didn't explain to them what I was doing, okay? So I do so many interviews that sometimes I forget that people who are being interviewed don't know what I'm doing. All they see is like just a microphone in front of them. Yeah, of course they know I'm a radio reporter, and maybe they know that I work for KPCC, but they're just talking, right? So sometimes I forget that I need to explain what I'm doing, right? That what you tell me will probably get on the radio, right? And so I did the story and aired their interviews with their status, and they got pissed off at me, and rightfully so. And then a few years after that, I met a young woman named Ana Venegas. Getting your degree in.
Okay, my name's Ana Venegas, and I'm getting my degree in sociology and a minor in gerontology.
So she was going to Cal State LA, and the university had sent me some information about her, and I gave her a call. I talked to her on the phone. Tell me a bit about, tell me where you were born, where you grew up.
I was born in Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico, and I grew up here in LA, and I've been living here in LA since I was only 10 months old.
Yeah, so that's the typical story, isn't it? When I talked to her on the phone, I learned that her younger sister was graduating from high school and was graduating that week. And they'd gotten into a fight because Ana didn't think her sister was living up to her potential. So she was graduating, but she didn't have any college plans. She really didn't, kind of coasted through high school. And I wanted to talk to Ana about that, and I wanted to talk to her sister about that too. I wanted them to be in the same room talking to me about that conflict. Her sister never showed up. I mean, no surprise, right? I mean, you can talk to a reporter about why you're pissed off at your sister, why your sister's pissed off at you. Probably not. But I was there, and in talking to Ana, and as she was telling me about the born-again Christian church that she went to, and I started thinking, something really, I can't call it anything else but, kind of beautiful started to unwrap itself in front of my ears, and I didn't think that I was going to hear this.
Okay.
And something sitting outside, something secular, So I'm asking her to sing a song, because I know that evangelical Christian, there's a lot of singing in evangelical Christian churches, right? So I'm asking her, it's a stereotype, I know, but it's often true.
I'm trying to think, should I sing a part of a Christian song first?
Yeah, something the name of it.
Okay.
And just sing me a bit.
The song is called Jesus, Lover of My Soul, and it's one of my favorites. So I'm a little shy. Okay. Jesus, lover of my soul, Jesus, I will never let you go. You're taking me from the miry clay, set my feet upon the rock, now I know.
Wow, man. Wow. I mean, how could you plan anything like that? So, of course, that made it into the story. And the lesson there is, just be nosy. Listen to your hunch. To quote, that famous movie, you know what happens to nosy fellas, kitty cat. Well, they get good tape, they get good quotes, they get good stories. Think like a chismoso, think like, your comadre, talking, talking on the street.
But they might get their noses cut.
They might get their noses cut. Which brings me to the point I made earlier about being fearless. Remember I was talking about being fearless and just kind of, asking whatever, and well, sometimes you gotta throw that out the window about being fearless, and in that, when you're out on a story, you have to decide, well, am I in a situation where the story may not be worth my health or my life? Will I get hurt? And that's one of the lessons I learned in 2007 in MacArthur Park at the May Day, what eventually came to be called the May Day Melee.
Some big pellet right there.
Pellets? Fucking bang.
All right, so what was happening is that 2006, some of you may remember just huge immigration marches in Southern California, right? Tons of people came out, immigrants, undocumented, the families of, and this was in response to the Sensenbrenner bill that would, national proposal that would have criminalized a lot of people in the families of the undocumented. And no one had seen, such a huge turnout in generations, really since Prop 187. And so in 2007, the year after that big march in Southern California, there was another march in MacArthur Park, once again calling for immigration reform. And at the time, the LAPD had, very lax policies on how to inform people that a protest had become an unlawful assembly. So that's a big deal. If you're ever in a protest, you want to know whether the cops have declared the protest an unlawful assembly, because certain things happen after the police declares it an unlawful assembly. They can clear people out. They can use force to clear people out. And that's exactly what happened in MacArthur Park on that day. I was there to relieve a reporter who was already there for a couple of hours. So really, I got to see the rubber bullets fly and the billy clubs, people getting hit left and right. So the police came in because there was some rock throwing kind of like in the corner, one side of the corner of the park, and some of the national Spanish language TV shows were doing their broadcasts out of MacArthur Park. They had all their tents and everything. So the cops in riot gear, masks, helmets, I don't know if body armor is the right way to describe it, but really outfitted, with boots and everything, just cleared everybody, including the newscasters, right, doing their newscasts.
Leave us alone! We're doing nothing to you! You don't need to beat up on anybody or shoot anybody!
So here, if you know MacArthur Park a little bit, you know that it kind of has some steep slopes. At the time, there wasn't the artificial grass that there is now, but it was mostly dirt and everything. And so the line of, I would say about a dozen riot gear officers coming at me and other people. And so I want to go and ask the commanding officer what's going on, what prompted them to clear the park. I want to ask them what's going on, basically, right? And this is what I got from one of the officers as I usually have my press pass, which is bright green usually, and I held it up. Okay, it may have gotten lost in there. Let's play it again. Okay, so the cop says, "I don't care, get back," when I showed him the press pass. Okay, so the point about being fearless, right? So fear is a very useful thing, And fear can tell you walk backwards. And so that's what I did. That day, one of our other reporters, the one I relieved, Patricia Nazario, got caught with some of the protesters, and the police hit her. She ended up in the hospital. So I'm very lucky that I was not in the wrong place at the wrong time. And, you know, I was up most of that night reporting during the newscasts about what had happened. And the lesson there, of course, is, you know, sometimes your press pass is not the most important tool that you can have as a reporter. I've got one more piece of tape that I want to play, and then we'll do like a Q&A. You know, if you have some questions, some comments, criticisms, requests to get your money back, anything like that, you know, I'll definitely take those. I've gotten to a point, you know, having done so many interviews, that some of the people that I've interviewed are starting to die, man. And so some of them prematurely. The head of the LA County Federation of Labor, Miguel Contreras, died of a heart attack. I think it was 8 or 9 years ago. I'd interviewed him several times, very powerful person in the labor movement in Los Angeles. There's a story recently about how he and his wife, who then took over his position, were really a power couple in Los Angeles, and everything they've done for the labor movement and the immigrant labor movement in Los Angeles. So, you know, he died. I covered his funeral mass at Our Lady of Angels. Some of the people, you know, that I've interviewed, I mean, they're old, right? They're in their 80s, and, you know, I've already interviewed them when they're getting up there in age. This person just, for some of you, all I have to do is...
Yeah, I was born enough.
Is say his name. So this is Lalo Guerrero.
So yeah, I was born in Tucson, Arizona. My parents came from Mexico in the early, must have been about 1912 or so, because I was born in 1916.
Okay, so what do you need to know about Lalo Guerrero? He's been called the father of Chicano music. He was from Arizona. He was born in Tucson, but he was really Mexican through and through. He was a ranchera singer in the 1930s. He was so good that a Mexican singer by the name of Lucha Reyes, I think it was in the late 20s, early 30s, came to Los Angeles, saw him perform one of his songs, and loved it so much that she recorded it. She then went back to Mexico. And now the song's totally, it's called Canción Mexicana. Now the song's associated with her, but few Mexicans know that one of their most near and dear songs was composed by an American of Mexican descent. And those nuances, those subtleties of being American and Mexican, and when are you American and when are you Mexican, became part of the story because of what Lalo Guerrero ended up talking about, and because of a song that he played almost at the very end of the interview. At the ends of interviews, I usually say, "Oh, is there something else you want to talk about? Anything I haven't asked you? Things important to say?" And I can't tell you how many times the cut that I end up using usually comes out of that last question. So I'd already been with Lalo Guerrero almost an hour. I think he was in his mid-80s by then. He was living out in Cathedral City. And I was doing a story because there was going to be some tribute to him, a big tribute to him. So I was doing a profile of him. And so I asked him, anything else? And he says, "Oh, I've got a new song." A new song? You're 80-something years old. You've accomplished so much. But as you know, with artists, it's always about creating. It's always about being in the moment.
You did.
I did. Let me do that.
this on a report yet that I'll put on the air. I'll voice it, I'll write it.
Yeah, you'll have to clean it up a little bit because this one is. Yeah. Here we go. Orgullo sagrado. Tengo un orgullo sagrado. He nacido mexicano, valiente y noble de corazón.
Okay, so this song has kind of all of the, not all of them, but it has images of the Mexican cactus, the nopal, the pyramids, you know, beautiful women with dresses, you know, tequila. It's almost, you know, throw everything in about, you know, being proud of being Mexican into one song. Throw, you know, the kitchen sink in there. And it's a long song. It was, you know, it's like 4 minutes long. And something happened at the end of the song that I never would have guessed. Something he said earlier should have tipped me off to what was going to happen. A couple of years before this, he had gotten a very prestigious presidential honor from Bill Clinton. And at that ceremony, he told me in this interview, was the first time that truly felt American. He was born in Tucson, right? He was born in Tucson. But he had always felt Mexican, right? So his mother, he learned music from his mother. She played the guitar, learned many of the beautiful Mexican songs from her. And it was being in Washington, D.C., given this very prestigious national honor for all of the songs that he had written, all his good causes that he had been involved with, all the nurturing of musicians that he had done. And he was basically being declared an American icon, right? And at the end of this song, you'll hear something about something that happened in his youth.
Por eso tiembla la tierra sobre la punta de mi puñal, mirando el águila negra que fue a pararse sobre el nopal. I don't know why I cry when I play that. I think it's because I discriminated with my people. I've never forgotten that. I forgive him, but I can't forget him.
He's crying. He's crying because when he was in his, if I remember correctly, his 20s, he had gone from Tucson to Mexico City, and he had sought a recording contract. And the Mexican, record owners, record company owners, would say, yeah, oh, you sing great, love it. Okay, let's fill out this paperwork. So when they saw that he'd been born in Tucson, they yanked the offer, right? And he just, like he says, he can forgive, but it's hard for him to forget that he as a Mexican went to Mexico and he was rejected.
I don't know, they're my people with the same blood, the same history. I love Mexico. I love Mexico as I love the United States, But I was born here, I live here, and here I am with my family. We're a big family, brothers, sisters. God, I had, you know what? I had nine brothers and sisters in my family, and my dad and my mom were 11 of us. But my mom had 11 that lived. She had triplets once and twins twice. 3 times to bat, she got 7 hits.
So the lesson for Lalo Guerrero is you can forgive, but you cannot forget. And in listening to all this tape and thinking about what I've done, I think the lesson for me is that you must always listen. You have to ask questions, and you have to ask questions really until it hurts. So thanks a lot for coming by and listening, and we can take some questions. Do we do microphone, Bob, or do they just get up and use their loud radio voices?
So if we could do a mic.
Yeah.
Come up, and it's recorded, right?
I can just mic normal.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
Then just talk about it.
Okay. And if you don't, anybody have any comments? Yeah?
Can you talk about how you got started in radio journalism?
Yeah, so let's see. I graduated from UC San Diego in 1993 with a political science degree, and I had taken literature classes too. I had originally wanted to be a marine biologist, but my math sucked. You know, I had done really bad in math, and the chemistry series, Chem 6 series, I don't know if they have it here, just totally weeded me out. It's a weeding series. Oh, you know about that. So I tried sociology, then history, and political science seemed to be like a nice combination of some of those things. But I had always admired writers. When I was growing up in Tijuana, in San Diego, and seeing Mexican television and seeing the people that they put on the cultural channels like Octavio Paz and Carlos Fuentes, you know, I was in awe of such articulate people. I was in awe of people who would talk eloquently about history, about art, that sort of thing. And I was in awe of the interviewers, right? So I knew I wanted to do that sort of thing. Then I worked for one of the papers on the Chicano paper on campus. That really, that's when the journalism bug bit me, to go out somewhere to a protest, a march, interview a lot of people, then having to make sense of it all, come back and tell a story, really, you know, got me into journalism. I wanted to be a newspaper reporter, but being in San Diego, it's a medium-sized market. You're not going to get your first job there. And there was too much happening at the time. The Truco en Español scene was bursting at the seams. I was doing freelance stories about that. So I just stayed in San Diego, and public radio gave me a chance. I got a part-time job on a news program for public radio, and kind of worked my way up there. Came to KPCC really at a great time because it was just starting out as a little rinky-dink station that had changed formats. And so they had gone all news and all talk. They had been kind of community music and some news before. And so I was the first of 3 reporters. So that's, I mean, that doesn't explain everything, but that's kind of how I got to where I am, and I just haven't let go. Yeah. Any other comments, questions? Yes?
I've been to a couple of events with the Rwandan refugees, and you know, the anger that develops hearing what happened to them is equally balanced by an amazement at the sweetness that remains in all of them. I don't know how they do that. But you have an obligation, I'm just a civilian, you're a journalist, you have an obligation to be somewhat more objective, and I wondered if all these years of needing to be somewhat objective has in any way flattened your emotional reactions to stories, or do you still get angry? Or
this is like, yeah, this is like we can have a long conversation about objectivity, what that means. You can never be fully objective. The point is that you bring in your life experiences, and you bring in, like me, I'm the son of a woman who cleaned houses for a living, and that's how she put me through college, right? I'm also somebody who went back and forth between San Diego and Tijuana, who went to Mexico a lot during the summers. I'm someone who hung out a lot with, at the apartment complex where my stepfather worked with Jewish retirees, singles, you know, after school, just kind of talking to them, that sort of thing. That was my after school program. You know, growing up, seeing, the people who hired my mom as patrones, as people, as employers, rather than kind of just neighbors, had an effect. What am I trying to get to? Objectivity. I think the conversation about objectivity is about, finding a story, telling it accurately, and bringing fairness to it, but also, but your question was more about whether, after years and years of doing this, whether I've come to realize, even with immigrants, right, the immigrant community. Here's a good example. I think in college, I was of the point of view that the immigrant could do no wrong, right? Okay, Mexicans could do no wrong, all right. So I don't think Mexicans have a monopoly on idiots. Okay, so what that means is that our population has the same proportion of idiots as any other population, okay? Same proportion of geniuses as any other population, right? So what does that say why do I say that? I say that because there are multiple sides to a story, and knowing how pain develops, how a crime is committed, who commits the crime, being honest about everything that makes a story happen, makes something happen, helps you tell the story. I think I'm sounding vague, aren't I? Am I sounding vague? Sorry. All right. Is there another follow-up question?
Have you ever had someone, after you've interviewed them and put the piece together, call you up and said, "You've misrepresented me, you took me out of context"?
Yeah, I have. And not very many, because I just play them the tape. So with radio, it's pretty easy because you can just play them the tape. The way we handle interviews is that we don't change. If you take, say, a 15 to 20 second portion of an interview, you don't change things around within that 20 second, whatever segment you're going to use, right? And you can do that. You can mess things around. You can take out ums, ahs, that sort of thing, right? So usually when somebody does that, calls and says you've misrepresented, it's often because, some of what they said may not put them in the best light. Some of what they said, maybe they're embarrassed. I try to, like I said earlier, I tell people what I'm doing. I try to tell them even now more, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a bit here and there. And I always tell them when I turn the tape recorder on, right? And so they know they're being recorded. So I think I don't think I've ever gotten a call where somebody, I'm very careful about that, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a comment, and then hopefully leads into a question. I'm still thinking of it. But from I guess from observing your storytelling method today, it seems I appreciate and I like what you are doing and how you are positioning yourself almost like a conductor, like you're orchestrating these stories, which you yourself have composed bits and pieces, through various modes as well. You have actual interviews, testimonies, you have song, you're getting music from other from actual recordings, and then you're also telling the story of you yourself narrating it. So I think that's pretty neat. And that's not how it originally started. How do you see this evolving? Are you going to incorporate another kind of machine or another kind of medium to tell your story or to enhance your stories?
Oh, I see, like another platform.
Right.
That's what. Well, so going back to the Mayday Melee tape, okay, so I was recording, and I don't know if you heard, I'm also describing what was going on. So what was happening is I was on the cell phone talking to the anchor, I think it was Shirley Jahad at the time, and I was telling her, okay, this is what's happening. And I'm pretty sure she had me on live, and so I was on the phone, I was recording. Now, we don't do this all the time, but now you're expected to take photographs too. At one point, we were doing a lot of live hits, what are called live hits. So throughout the day, you'd hear from the reporters out in the field. And that involved sometimes taking the iPhone iTalk app or voice memo, that sort of thing, and working out a news report to where you write it out and you're recording yourself and you're reading what you've written, and maybe you've got the LA City Councilman or the LA Mayor, and you tell them, okay, I'm gonna ask you this question, just say something real brief, and then they say something real brief and come back to you, you record it and you send it off. And that's your news report. You don't have to write it, you don't have to mix it or anything like that, you can email it. That's one way. The platform is basically the sound, your text. If you listen to programs like Radiolab, which I recommend that you do, I have two opinions about Radiolab. I think it's brilliant on the one hand. Sometimes, on the other hand, sometimes it gives me a headache. Sometimes it's overload. Sometimes it's way too much. So there can be too much coming at you. One of the beautiful things I think, especially in LA where we spend so much time in the car, about public radio is that time when, you're not going anywhere, you're in traffic, you're gonna listen to KPCC or KCRW or whatever, right? And you hear this story that's a good 4 or 5 minutes long, and 5 minutes for us is a long time, right? NPR gets to do 7 minutes story, 8 minutes story. Come on, man. Now our limit at KPCC is 4.5 minutes, right? Because of the breaks that we have from national to local and that sort of thing. For us, 4 minutes, I'd prefer it to be 5 minutes, right? You can do a lot with that. The limitation is your curiosity and your creativity. And that's one of the things that I think still challenges me about this job is how to tell a story in a creative way. For example, Joe Frank, do you guys remember Joe Frank from like 15, 20 years ago, that sort of thing? So he was an innovative radio theater producer at KCRW, he's still doing some stuff. So he had a story once, and it was radio theater, right? And the scene is some country in Africa, and the colonialists are having their tea, and they are complaining about how the tennis court isn't being kept up. And then all of a sudden you hear like a radio, and you hear the scratchy radio, right? Oh, there's a news report. Okay, let's listen to the news report. And then the reporter comes on. Oh, we're reporting from such and such. Joe Frank did a crossfade. So he went from the scratchy sound of the reporter coming out of the radio to a live version of the reporter. So well mic'd, like you were there, like present. Seamless, like it went from one to the other, and I thought, wow, that's really cool. So I thought, oh, I want to do that. So I looked, always in the search for the opportunity to do that. It came to me when I profiled a family that was watching President Obama's first State of the Union address and was waiting for him to say something about immigration reform or something like that, right? So I was there talking to them and got the TV audio, which wasn't very good and everything. And then I'd gotten clean audio, and so I went from that, did that little crossfade. Maybe a roundabout way to say the creativity, is you constantly have to push yourself to be creative and how to use sound, music, storytelling, that sort of thing. Yeah, you have a question?
You're presenting a lot of stories about hyphenated America today, so as a journalist of however many years you've been doing it, what have you learned about hyphenated America, and how do you use your creativity to always show and tell more stories about hyphenated America?
One of the things I've learned about hyphenated Americans is to pronounce their name the way they pronounce it. If it's Perez, it's Perez. If it's Perez, it's Perez. Hyphenated Americans is just, okay, here's an example. Not too long after I came to LA, I started, we'd go into neighborhoods like South LA, just neighborhoods where, you know, it's hard life, you know, blacks and Latinos living together, right? So one of the things I started hearing Spanish speakers say to me when talking about African Americans was, ah, no, el moreno, esto, el moreno, esto. The word moreno, okay, in Latin America, people mostly say negro to describe a person who's black, African, that sort of thing. There's a whole another discussion about colonialism in Latin America and whether that's a term of endearment or not, that sort of thing. So my experience having gone to Mexico was that okay, you call somebody who's of African descent a negro. Then they're using the word moreno. What's going on? So I started asking people, okay, well, it's because the African Americans had overheard the word negro and they thought it meant negro. They thought that people were saying something else, something derogatory. So they changed their language, which was fascinating to me. Hyphenated Americans. To me, I always look for, if I find an immigrant and they have their kids with them, you know, elementary school, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, something like that, I always try to set it up where there's a conversation back and forth. Either the kid telling me, translating what their mom or dad is saying, or just letting the immigrant, whether it be a Spanish speaker, Farsi speaker, you know, whatever. So there's just so much. You know, and one of the things I found as a Mexican American, if you know, it's one of the terms I use, some of the issues that I have, you can find in many other hyphenated communities. You know, the issues of assimilation, the issues of language. One of our reporters did a beautiful piece about, he's Korean American. He knew how to speak Korean as a little kid, but now he didn't. His parents did not speak English very much. His story was about getting a translator to mediate between him and his parents. And then when that happened, and he did all these interviews and put it into the story, it's like the aha moment. Oh, really? That's why you do this and you do that. You tell me to do this and that, you know. To me, that hasn't happened yet. I still speak Spanish, and I still can speak Spanish to my mom, which makes me think there are a lot of people who can't speak the native language of their parents anymore. And so there's a huge wall between them. And those are stories I want to, you know, talk to people about. Yeah, you have a question?
Hi, I'd like to know more about your work as a journalist. So how does it work? Do you take your assignments, or how many do you have to produce for a certain, how many times do you have to put something together?
Am I on air? It varies every week. Maybe I'll be on air 3 or 4 times a week, depending on the length of the stories. They're what we call dailies. A daily is something you have to work on that day and get it done that day. Usually it ends up being a 1-minute story, kind of when KPCC's gone through a couple different kind of formats and the way we do our news. It used to be that we could do like a 1-minute story, 2-minute story, 3-minute story, 4 or 5-minute story. Now really we only do kind of 1-minute and 4-minute stories. So if you're going to do a daily, it's going to turn into a 1-minute radio story, but then a nice whatever, 600 word, maybe longer, possibly longer web post, and that's a print story where you can explain the issue. So do a couple of those each week and work on a feature, a 4-minute feature per week usually, depending on how much research is done. I get assigned probably a third or more of my stories, but because I know I do mostly education stories, so I know what's happening. I know that the Cal State trustees are meeting tomorrow and they're going to talk about a sexual assault report on campuses. They're going to talk about the success fees at Cal State campuses. So I know, okay, I got to go there tomorrow morning, and I do. Go there tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., listen to it, kind of hear, they're going to be student protesters, so I have to talk to student protesters and put together a couple of stories tomorrow, probably 2 1-minute stories on both of those issues, and then the accompanying print versions for the online. Yeah. Does that answer? Yes. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for young journalists?
Do I have any advice for young journalists? Yeah. I don't want to be cynical. Here's my advice. Two different thoughts. Some of the Chicanos in the sense of a politicized Mexican American activist, right? I notice that their rejection of the institutions, of the injustice of the institutions in the United States, keeps them from embracing those institutions, the institutions of the Constitution, the courts, the various levels of government, that sort of thing. I've had conversations with people about the embrace of the institution and changing the institution so that they can be more respectful, more reflective of who we are today as a society. Journalism is such an important part of holding those institutions accountable. Journalism has not had the proportion of Latino, African American, Asian American, go down the list of people represented as reporters so that the stories can reflect. People who get into journalism, I think the traditional, people who come from maybe a middle class, upper middle class background know the power of being in that platform, having access to, being in a newspaper, being on the air, being a foreign correspondent. I think that understanding the power of journalism is something that I would highly recommend. What can it do? Journalism, by exposing things that aren't right, can push public officials to change what's not right, whether it be at a school district. Here's something that we often don't think about. We all pay taxes, different amounts of taxes. We pay sales tax, we pay income tax, state and federal, right? We don't have a choice, right? So there goes our money. There goes the money that you spend, right? So what if it's not spent wisely? What if it's not spent right, right? So what's the use of you actually giving the money to somebody else, right? I mean, and that's one of the things that journalism, I think, is constantly tries to do, is to hold the public officials. That's why you hear stories about misappropriation of funds so much, because it's your money. We're letting you know that somebody's stealing it, So those are very important things. And believe it or not, it's only been in the last maybe 4 or 5 years that I've started to understand that power of reporting and journalism. And I'm thinking, whoa, okay, let's find some of those stories. Let's dig in the documents. Let's dig into how public money is being spent. So my advice to young journalists is keep at it, do it. It's a vow of poverty in the beginning. It can help you grow, learn. It's helped me grow and learn, and keep your options open. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks a lot. I'm going to stick around a little bit. Thank you very much.